Not every project needs to be a universal realignment of the spheres. It does not have to be imbued with a self-evident righteousness that pervades across entire areas and communities into a impossible-to-ignore final goal. Sometimes it can be a dumb idea that gets out of hand because you end up spending way too much time contemplating it. Which is why, for years, I've been trying to get Hotel California to be playing constantly along Highway 1 in California. This is Jason Scott Talks His Way Out of It, a podcast about technology, history, and getting myself out of debt. Thanks to Jeff Atwood and the hundreds of other supporters on Patreon and elsewhere who have been supporting me and helping me get out of debt. Let's walk this through. Highway 1 is a highway that runs along the coast of California, all the way along the state. Not 100% of the coast, but pretty close. If you start at the top of it, you are notably south of Oregon, and you can drive for hundreds and hundreds of miles along beautiful coasts with waves crashing against incredible rocks, and you curve back and forth all the way through highways that in many ways shouldn't exist, and endless rock slides and rainy weather constantly prove it, until you end up in Los Angeles, the city that Hotel California in many ways feels like the place that's being discussed. But you have several choices if the experience of going along the coast is going to have a musical soundtrack. You can either choose an album that plays and maybe plays on repeat, or maybe there's a song that at any given time, if you were to suddenly hear it come over the radio, you would turn it up all the way and drive along contemplating where you are. My personal choice is Hotel California by the Eagles, a otherworldly song with lyrics that could be interpreted many different ways, which people have spent way too much time interpreting, but which gives a certain feeling of being part of something involving California and experiencing being both trapped and liberated by it. Now, how can we ensure that this song is always at your fingertips? Naturally, we have MP3 files, and we have ways for people to choose by themselves to play this. But I was always intrigued by a sort of serendipitous interaction with it. Imagine driving down a highway while the roads are turning and curving, and you flip through the radio using your steering wheel controls, of course, and there's Hotel California playing. And as you drive along, you don't lose sight of it. It keeps playing. The song plays all the way through. Wouldn't that be nice? So how do you do that? And that's where I really got into the technology of the project. A natural idea that came along to me was to find a least used frequency on the radio spectrum and start broadcasting there. Perhaps there'd be a little bit of a legal tangle over how powerful you'd make this radio station, but you could choose a frequency that nobody notices and start broadcasting. But it's a very long highway. You will very, very quickly run out of signal strength, especially if you're trying to be powerful but not too powerful. So your mind might wander, as mine did, to a solar-powered Raspberry Pi that is playing a clip over and over again with an awareness of time such that it is always playing the song at the exact same moment as its brethren are at other locations along the highway. We're talking, in other words, about a mesh network of small micro-broadcasting radio stations playing one song to a time-synchronized schedule, scattered like little tin cans along various highways along the coast of California. Immediately, depending on how much this attracts you, you run into problems. How do you make it so that it is not ecologically terrible? How do you account for when authorities inevitably move through and start destroying these? How do you make it fun for them when they find them? How many do you need? How cheap can you make it without making it the aforementioned ecological nightmare? How will you handle checking them on a regular basis? Where are all of these problems going to be discussed and worked through without alerting folks to the fact that this is happening? Because nothing would make the joy of it lessen, like everybody already knowing it's out there and people going to the West Coast and going down Highway 1 specifically looking for this. There are other examples of isolated technology used in interesting ways, like the Mojave phone booth, where a payphone had a number and was in the middle of the desert, and people could call it and talk to somebody who was calling from around the world just to talk to anyone who happened to pick it up. This sort of parallel human and technology interaction is what I'm trying to think about when I think about Infinite Hotel California. You can turn the dial anytime you want, but you can never leave. What a strange experience it is for people when they stumble on something that clearly represents a lot of work and a lot of effort, and there's no sign of the person or persons behind it. The joy of finding out that people have done something for the joy of it, that they've created some piece of work, is why I haven't completely thrown this out of hand. Perhaps it's best to start small with a prototype, just a small tin can-sized computer that broadcasts Hotel California a few miles along a specific, hard-to-navigate part of Highway 1. There are portions of it in Northern California where the road just keeps twisting and turning, meaning you would stumble on this and be able to listen to it for quite some time before you got out of range. Maybe people would discuss it and you'd start to see the reactions to it. And then maybe you would build another one and another one. Perhaps it would be an excuse to talk to people about hosting it in their businesses and homes, but that seems to be an amount of interpersonal interaction that the same kind of people who would put together such a project would never achieve. I've driven along Highway 1 many different times. When I'm in San Francisco and I'm at the archive, we will have visitors especially from other countries or other states, and I will be asked, is there someplace we can go to see something other than San Francisco? And here's my little recipe for instant, or at least lasting, memories. Leave the Internet Archive earlier in the morning, 9 or 10, head out over to the coast, get on Highway 1, and start driving it, just driving it, stopping off at farm stands or outcroppings of rocks, taking pictures, talking about things, enjoying how the landscape changes from breathtaking coasts to small, tiny towns, and then back again to farms and this side of overdeveloped, only to once again move through mountains and impossible roads until finally you find yourself at Santa Cruz. Once in Santa Cruz, enjoy the boardwalk, take a walk on the beach, take a walk on the docks, and then get in the car and ride up 17, stopping off, depending on the person you're with, at Los Gatos, California for pizza and candy, and then keep driving north until the person snoozing in the car pulls up in front of the Internet Archive. Everybody falls asleep on this trip. There's a loop that I feel captures a whole range of the environment there. This was never my home. I've never lived in California. but as somebody who would come in on a regular basis, that experience of going out into the coast and seeing things you would never see, punctuated by very mundane towns and businesses, until ending up in a whirlwind of arcades and sugar candy and roller coasters, only to quietly head north once again, feels almost like a dream. And I feel like the only thing missing is an infinite looping playlist of Hotel California. This is Jason Scott Talks His Way Out of It, thanks to James Bekoyanu, Ernie Hershey, Michael Rubin, David Fisher, Dilip Reddy, Sean Kelly, Trixie the Cat, Martin, Sembiance, Benjamin Guts, Joey Mink, and Anonymous, along with the hundreds of other supporters on Patreon and elsewhere who have been supporting me and helping me get out of debt. I already did a you can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave joke. Oh well.